In a few minutes, I'm going to be joined by Bruno Lemarquis, the UN's resident coordinator in Haiti. He'll join us virtually from Port-au-Prince to discuss the International Donor Conference in Haiti, which takes place tomorrow. On that subject, tomorrow, the Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, will travel to Port-au-Prince in Haiti to participate in the international event for the financing of reconstruction of Haiti's southern peninsula following the August 2021 earthquake. She will also meet with senior government authorities, UN colleagues, and other stakeholders at a critical moment as the country recovers from the earthquake and identifies a pathway forward for the elections, stability, and sustainable development. The Deputy Secretary General will also be convening a technical meeting to take stock of the progress in the ongoing efforts to eradicate cholera in Haiti. She will return to New York on the afternoon of the 17th of February. Another piece of good news is on Friday, Stephane Williams will be beamed in to this very briefing room, I assume from Tripoli or from wherever she is, to answer your questions. On Ukraine, while the international focus remains on the political situation, it's... That will be my epitaph on my tombstone. All right, that's okay. We'll try again. All right. On Ukraine, just as obviously you heard the Secretary General speak to you yesterday, we also want to highlight the equally important humanitarian situation, the fact that there are 2.9 million people in need of humanitarian assistance and protection due to the 8-year-old conflict in the eastern oblasts of Donetsk and Luhansk. Our top priority now is to alleviate the people's suffering. We've recently launched a humanitarian response plan for 2022, aiming to reach 1.8 million of the most vulnerable of those men, women, and children, to reach them with assistance and protection services on both sides of the contact line. Our ability to reach these people remains largely dependent on two factors. First, we need safe and unfettered access across all areas where there are humanitarian needs. Second, we urgently need donors to step up in their support to fund our humanitarian response plan, which seeks 190 million. As always, our humanitarian operations in Ukraine and elsewhere are guided by internationally recognized principles of humanity, neutrality, impartiality, and operational independence. Just as you know, James Swan, the Secretary General Special Representative for Somalia, briefed the Council this morning. He said that national elections in Somalia are now more than 1 year behind the constitutionally prescribed schedule. He called on the electoral management bodies as well as Somalia's political leaders to accelerate and quickly conclude the elections for the House of the People. Mr. Swan said that while political tensions among some Somali leaders continue to flare up sporadically, they've so far been contained and have not derailed the electoral process. The risk remains, he warned, that a miscalculation could cause tensions to spill over into the conflict, but that this, and he added, the security, political, humanitarian conditions in Somalia remain fragile. He remains guardedly hopeful that the country will make further progress in the areas in the coming months. This afternoon, Hans Grunberg, the special envoy for Yemen, will brief on the situation in Yemen, and he told me yesterday he would brief you afterwards at the stakeout, so we will let you know when he comes out. Quick note on Cameroon, where I can tell you that the Secretary General condemns the attacks on a girls' school in the southwest region of Cameroon by an armed group that took place on February 11th. He calls for an end to all attacks against civilians, including the attacks and threats of attacks on schools in the northwest and southwest regions of Cameroon. And in Niger today, the government and humanitarian community jointly launched the country's 2022 humanitarian response plan and the government's national plan of support to vulnerable population. The humanitarian response plan seeks 553 millions to help 2.3 million people, including those internally displaced, returnees and refugees, and vulnerable people living in host communities. The humanitarian response plan will provide food, security, nutrition, protection, and education. Niger could face a serious food crisis this year due to a combination of poor weather conditions as well as the destruction of livelihoods due to insecurity. That insecurity is especially existent in the border regions of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Nigeria, which has forced hundreds of thousands of people to flee their homes. More than 500,000 people are forcibly displaced, including 264,000 internally displaced people. More than 60,000 children have been deprived of their rights to education following the closure of over 700 schools due to insecurity. Despite restrictions on humanitarian space and funding shortfalls, humanitarian partners assisted 1.4 million out of 2.1 million targeted for 2021. Last year's humanitarian response plan was only 42% funded. And Tonga is, today's the 1 month anniversary of the volcano and tsunami in Tonga. The resident coordinator, Sanaka Samaran Sinha, reiterated the UN solidarity with the people of Tonga, where approximately 85% of the population was impacted and more than 2,500 people have been internally displaced. She acknowledged the resilience of the people of Tonga and the determination of Tonga's leaders and the love and support shown by the global community and the Tongan Pacifica diaspora, partners and donors. We hope to have her brief you virtually this week as well. And quick Covax update for you, in fact, related to Haiti, where Haiti received some 240,000 doses of COVID-19 vaccines this week through the Covax facility, some donated by the U.S., we say thank you, bringing the total number of Covax doses to the country that have received to more than 1 million, more than 250,000 doses from Covax donated by France, and we say thank you to them, arrived in Jamaica, while more than 1 million doses arrived in Costa Rica, donated by Spain. Thank you again. To date, nearly 100 million doses have been delivered to 33 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean alone through Covax. Globally, WHO tells us that 4.2 billion people are fully vaccinated, but in low and middle income countries, more than 54% of people have not yet received a single dose of the vaccine. And today, we turn our eyes to Bishkek because we thank our friends in Kyrgyzstan for their full payment of their budget dues in full, bringing us up to 56. Edie?
Thank you, Steph. In light of the Russian announcement that it was pulling some of its troops away from the border, does the Secretary General have any reaction, and has he been on the phone at all today with any of the world leaders on this issue?
No fresh contacts today. For just scheduling purposes, he's been, I think, the last 3 hours or so in a global town hall meeting. But he continues, obviously, to watch the situation very closely. You know, we welcome any and all movements that point to de-escalation, whether it is on the ground or whether it is rhetoric.
A second question on Ethiopia. The government today lifted the state of emergency, which had been in effect for quite a few months. Does the Secretary General have any reaction to that? And I know, we all know he's been pushing for a ceasefire.
This is a decision that we very much welcome. And for the Secretary General, I think his words of encouragement would be for the authorities in Ethiopia to take further measures to ensure the decision is followed up by the release of those remaining people that are in detention as a result of the state of emergency, or for the reasons of their detention to be regularly reviewed, at least, by a court and other independent, impartial judiciary. He also urges the parties to continue to take concrete actions to build goodwill and strengthen prospects for peace, including committing to a cessation of hostilities, as we've been calling for quite some time, and also for facilitating the free and unhindered movement of humanitarian aid, something we've also been calling for quite some time. James, and then we'll go to Sam and then Michelle.
Two more on Ukraine, if I can. You say you've not seen that you would welcome any de-escalation. Do you believe there is currently de-escalation? We have the announcement from the Russians they're pulling back troops. In the last hour, I spoke to the US Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield, and she said the US cannot confirm that, and the threat is still there.
We have no access to, I mean, we have access to almost the same information that you do. Obviously, the Secretary General's also been on the phone, as he mentioned to you yesterday, with two critical players. What we're seeing is a continuation of diplomacy. The German Chancellor is in Moscow today. I think he just met with President Putin. He was in Kiev yesterday to meet with President Zelensky. This is what we want to see, is a continuation of diplomacy. I don't think we are in a position to give you an hour-by-hour reading of where we are on the danger meter, so to speak. But I think as long as people keep talking and talking honestly, I think it's a very good step.
And one more question on Ukraine. A tweet in the last hour or so by the Ukrainian ambassador to the United Nations, and I think following the Secretary General's comments, his statement yesterday, where he was invoking the Charter and Article 2 of the Charter. And the ambassador says, has the UN and Secretariat leadership learned lessons from the occupation of Abkhazia and South Ossetia? Will it now defend the UN Charter when the Duma asked Putin to recognise the so-called Donetsk and Luhansk areas? And then he says, does Guernica by the Security Council bear any meaning since the Charter 2B seems optional? I mean, I think the point he's making here is that the Secretary General is invoking the Article 2 of the Charter, and he's suggesting that the UN has ignored that in the past.
Well, I'm not going to get into a back and forth with this ambassador or any other ambassador. What I can tell you is that the Secretary General's responsibility is to be a guardian of the Charter. I think he has made that point very clearly yesterday. Our issue on our position on the territorial integrity of Ukraine remains unchanged. It is guided by the relevant General Assembly resolution, and I think Secretary General's words yesterday speak for themselves. Ms. Ibtisam.
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up on Ukraine, because yesterday you said to, I think, James, that that the Secretary General still stands to his opinion regarding Russia invasion, and that Russia won't invade Ukraine. But yesterday when we heard from him in the afternoon, he kind of had a different tone. So
I mean, listen, we can interpret. My interpretation was that the Secretary General made a forceful appeal for diplomacy, a forceful reminder of the Charter. I think it was a more explicit explanation of his position, but his intuition, from what he said to you directly earlier in January, has not changed.
So I have a question on Libya. So you talked yesterday and days before about the designated and the prime minister and the current prime minister, etc. So do you believe if the designated prime minister form a government and goes through the process that he needs to go, do you believe that Mr. Dubaiba should hand in power to him?
Look, I think to mention, I think James talked about lessons learned. One of the important things to me about lessons learned is to keep things one day at a time. So this is the situation today. What is important is that all the Libyan leaders adhere to a process which should be established, and that there is unity of leadership, unity of institutions in Libya, and that I think all Libyan leaders should work towards that. Michelle, thank you, Ibtisam.
Thanks, Steph. A couple of questions on Ukraine. What planning is the UN doing to possibly prepare for, on the humanitarian front, if there is an invasion?
Well, we are continuing our focus on the humanitarian end. I mean, I think I mentioned that today. I am not aware of any major prepositioning of aid or anything. I mean, our work in Ukraine continues. We've not our footprint of staff has not diminished, and our focus on the humanitarian situation in the oblasts I mentioned remains.
And this morning, President Putin described the situation in eastern Ukraine as a genocide. How does the UN describe the situation in eastern Ukraine?
I refer you to the way I've just described it in terms of, I mean, the words I just used was talking about a humanitarian crisis.
Does the UN believe there's a genocide taking place?
I will refer you to what I've said. I can only describe it in the words that I've used. Alan, what are you going to ask me about?
Follow-up. Thank you, Stephane. Yesterday, DSG called to avoid the incitement rhetoric during his statement concerning the Ukraine. Today, we saw some publications in Sun, Mirror Media setting even the timing of Russian so-called invasion. It's 3 a.m. local time. How can you comment on this? Is that a propaganda war, or what is it?
In any situation where there's a risk of conflict, whether it's the current situation we're talking about or others, incendiary rhetoric is dangerous and needs to be avoided. It is important that words focus on trying to find a diplomatic solution. Stefano.
Thank you, Stephane. Yes, follow up in both Ukraine and Libya. For Ukraine, is just a coincidence that the Secretary General did that speech yesterday, and today we have this little hope coming, good news, or he knew something that we didn't know. And if he is going to, is he going to speak directly with Putin, with President Putin? I mean, he's planning to do this eventually?
We will confirm contacts as they happen. I think in his own words, and I'm going to paraphrase my own boss, but he said he's not a, I don't think he said he's not a witch, but he's not, what's the word of people who can see into the future? Yeah, see what? Yeah, he's not a mind reader or seer of future. I mean, he doesn't spend his times reading the coffee grinds at the bottom of his espresso cup. So he said what he said yesterday, and without knowledge of what will happen in the next 24 to 48 or 72 hours.
Okay, and then on Libya, it's a kind of a follow-up. We understand that there is still, you waiting some days, maybe the development to finally have some more specific on who is actually the prime minister recognized by the UN in this moment. But did he try to talk directly with both of them, or he only talks through her special, the special advisor?
The contacts are had with the person who speaks for him, which is Stephanie Williams, and who will speak to you on Friday, inshallah. James.
Yes. First, I asked you yesterday about Afghan refugees in Abu Dhabi. I wondered if you had anything on that.
And that's my bad.
Understood. Something different then. An NGO group has done some research suggesting that financial institutions have sent more than $1.5 trillion to the coal industry in loans and underwriting from January 2019 to November 2021. The financial world is supposed to be getting with the green economy. Does the Secretary-General find that figure $1.5 trillion worrying?
I have no way to confirm that figure. What is clear is that there's a continuing, and I think we've seen in some places, increase investment in unclean energy. And for the Secretary General, I mean, his message is clear, is that he wants to see money going to clean energy if we're going to reach the 1.5 degree target. Okay. Yes, Pam, and then we will go to Bruno Lemarquis after this. Pam?
Just a quick follow-up to my question yesterday. Who do you expect to be at the Thursday Security Council meeting?
I do not know yet. As soon as we know, I will let you know. Okay, give us 2 seconds. Fahan is going to come in and do the second bit. And Bruno, are you on?
I'm on. Can you hear?
Yes, we can hear you. Give us 2 seconds, and we will be right with you.